Remember when we were first introduced to the most interesting man in the world?
I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I prefer those Equis.
Let's go back.
Tamagotchi,
Of Y2K.
Sitting at a restaurant, Jonathan Goldsmith is enjoying his meal when a fan comes up hoping to get a photo with the most interesting man in the world. A man who, if he were to mispronounce your name, you would feel compelled to change it. That fan was Michael Jordan. The Dos Equis commercials first aired in 2006 and took the nation by storm. The commercials were for the Heineken brand beer, where a narrator would discuss the most interesting man in the world, just like those old Chuck Norris jokes we used to laugh at. They featured over-the-top claims like mosquitoes refused to bite him out of respect, or he once ran a marathon because it was on his way. The commercials would all end the same, with the man looking into the camera and saying, "I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I prefer Dos Equis," followed by, "Stay thirsty, my friends." The campaign was an instant success and lasted for over a decade, sparking memes, jokes, and increased sales for Heineken, but it got me wondering, who really is the most interesting man in the world? While working on my 90s food tier list video, I was combing through a lot of retro commercials, and then recommended to me was a compilation of Dos Equis commercials, and I fell into a deep rabbit hole. Now, he may not be allowed to touch the art museums like his character, but actor Jonathan Goldsmith has lived quite the interesting life. He saved a man from dying in a blizzard while climbing Mount Whitney. He hung out at the Whiskey in Los Angeles where the house band was The Doors, ended up causing a traffic jam on the 101 Hollywood freeway while naked in his convertible, and accompanied Judy Garland on a dinner date. How do I know all of this? Well, from the man himself. This YouTube rabbit hole I went down ended with me finding out that Goldsmith wrote a book called Stay Interesting, and it puts into perspective the incredible journey he had on his way to becoming one of the most recognizable faces of the 2000s. There's a lot of fun stories in this book that I won't be touching on, so I would recommend picking it up if you want to hear some more stories about old Hollywood and the entire entertainment industry as a whole. We're going to begin this story where every aspiring actor starts out, the struggle. Goldsmith and his roommate used to feed themselves by dressing up and going to bar mitzvahs, acting like they belonged and eating the food. It was kind of like a prequel to The Wedding Crashers. Then he spent some time sleeping on Walter Koenig's couch, who would later go on to star as Chekhov on Star Trek. Then he got his big break. Well, in terms of living arrangements. His friend contacted him about living on an old frog farm. She needed someone to stay there rent-free to keep an eye on it because of the recent issues she had with a former tenant, who claimed he was going to burn the house down. He jumped on the opportunity and called up his friend Nick Colasanto, who was also a struggling actor at the time, and would later go on to play Coach on Cheers. Colasanto also jumped on the opportunity, and the two became roommates in a shack that had no heat, no television, and one chair that they would take turns occupying. Goldsmith first started acting on stage, where he played alongside Dustin Hoffman in a show called A Cook for Mr. General. He describes Hoffman as his nemesis, because as two short Jewish men, they would find themselves competing for parts. After dabbling in live shows, Goldsmith headed to Hollywood after receiving a false lead from Shelley Winters. Eventually, he ended up getting offered a role on the television series Gunsmoke, where he lied about riding a horse. Don House, Gary Cooper's double, would later go on to teach him how to ride. His first appearance on Gunsmoke, he was shot and killed. But it was okay, because they kept bringing him back as new characters, where he was promptly shot again. And then he got shot the next time. And the next. And again. And again. And again. And finally he was stabbed. Just kidding, he got shot again. This opened the door for more guest spots, making him what I would call the Sean Bean of his era. In the movie Go Tell the Spartans, he shoots himself. In Hang 'em High, he appeared alongside Clint Eastwood, where he was once again shot. In the TV series Knight Rider, he was shot. And finally, possibly the crown jewel of his on-screen deaths, he was shot by John Wayne in Wayne's last film, The Shootist. He tells a story about this time where he was getting shot in the head with the equivalent of a paintball gun right to the forehead. They did 9 takes, but after the first 7, he was beginning to welt and seeing double. Wayne looked down at him and asked how much they were paying him for him, and after he told him, Wayne responded, "Well, anyone who's shot by the Duke usually becomes famous." Unfortunately for Goldsmith, it wouldn't happen for many years later. Now, I joke about the number of times Goldsmith died on screen, but he really did have one hell of a run in guest spots on some of the most iconic shows. I'm going to try and run through them all without losing my breath. He appeared on Bonanza, Charlie's Angels, Chips, Dallas.
Let me see the stuff.
Let me see the money.
Dynasty, Hawaii Five-0, Dr. Kildare.
Funny, I always call it Terry.
Ironside, MacGyver, Magnum P.I., Highway to Heaven.
You made a big loser out of me tonight. So now you're gonna lose. Big.
St. Elsewhere, The Mission Impossible, Murder, She Wrote, Perry Mason,
Look, I'm not trying to be fresh. It's just that I'm sure that I know her from someplace.
The Virginian, Fall Guy, The Rockford Files, T.J. Hooker,
Because I'm the only guy that can crack that safe and put $5 million in cold hard diamonds in your
The
hand.
Streets of San Francisco, and finally the A-Team. It took me nearly a week to find all of that footage for only 1 minute's worth of content. Was it worth it? Abso-fucking-lutely. During this time of his life, he befriended Fernando Lamas, an actor who was known for his Argentine accent and machismo on and off camera. Many of you might know him from Saturday Night Live, as Billy Crystal spoofed him in a series of sketches called Fernando's Hideaway. Goldsmith and Lamas became close friends. Goldsmith would have lunch with Lamas and his wife at home every day. If he missed a day, Lamas would call him up wondering if everything was alright. The two even went as far as starting a production company together. They would spend some days at Lamas' house hanging out with people like Rock Hudson, James Doolittle, Barbara Rush, Dane Clark, and Anthony Newley. Goldsmith describes Lamas as very chauvinistic, but chivalrous as well. He liked to make people feel uncomfortable just for a laugh. Recalling a story on a packed elevator, Lamas announced, "What do you think of these shoes? I always get a blowjob in these shoes," in an attempt to embarrass Goldsmith. After Lamas passed in 1982, his family spread his ashes off the back of Goldsmith's boat. The reason I bring up this friendship is because Goldsmith's most interesting man in the world character was based on Lamas, from the outlandish stories to the Argentine accent he used in the commercials. Which leads us into the audition for Dos Equis. Goldsmith found himself in a campground above Malibu, sleeping in his truck after his $150 million marketing company with over 100 employees sunk and split apart. As he went into the bathroom to shower and finding no hot water, he felt like he was starting over again in his late 60s. Attorney bills, his mortgage, and no income left him on the brink of bankruptcy. Getting dressed and using his truck side mirror to shave, his agent Barbara had booked him an audition for a commercial. All he knew was it was for Dos Equis, a Heineken beer product used to boost sales in the Latino market, and they wanted a Hemingway-esque man to be their spokesperson. The audition was to be completely improv, digging back into Goldsmith's roots in acting. When he arrived as an older Jewish man from the Bronx, he looked over a long line of young Latino actors ready to audition. He was about to leave when he remembered Barbara would have been upset for not at least trying, so he entered the audition and waited. Then he waited some more. He got bored and took off his sock and shoe when the director's voice came from behind the dark booth. Why did you take off your sock?" he asked. Right then it hit him. All of the interesting stories he'd lived have led up to this moment. The thought of his friend Fernando Lamas and his machismo demeanor took over, and he began speaking in an Argentine accent, and attempted to make them laugh. He went on to tell outlandish stories as the director prompted him by asking him questions about the validity of these stories. Goldsmith heard laughing coming from behind the camera box and ended his audition with the line, "And that's how I came to arm wrestle Fidel Castro, and the rest is history." The most interesting man in the world and Jonathan Goldsmith entered the zeitgeist of the early 2000s, skyrocketing him into one of the most famous faces on television and the internet. This helped Goldsmith gain notoriety in the acting community, even appearing in Mamma Mia! Here We Go Again, and becoming friends with one of the most powerful men in the free world. In August 2011, at a fundraiser in Vermont, Goldsmith bumped into President Barack Obama, who repeated back all of his escapades his character had been involved in from the commercials. They hit it off so well that he was one of 11 guests to Obama's 50th birthday celebration. He was surprised when Obama signaled for him to come sit down next to him at the open seat at the dinner table. The two ate, drank, and smoked cigars together the entire night. The next time he visited, Obama met him in the Oval Office to give him gold presidential cufflinks. Another time, at the same restaurant that he took a photo with Michael Jordan, Leonardo DiCaprio walked across the restaurant just to shake his hand, and then the next week, Jennifer Lawrence did the same thing. The man John Wayne shot had finally become famous. It just took a bit longer than Goldsmith probably would have hoped for. But like all good things, his Dos Equis commercials came to an end in 2016 when they replaced him with the younger actor Augustin Legrand. Sales dropped and the campaign officially concluded in 2018. Goldsmith, however, continued his journey on being one of the most interesting men in Hollywood by using his fame for good. Today, he works with the Mines Advisory Group to help remove old active mines and bombs from the jungles of Vietnam, Cambodia, and other parts of the world. He and his dog work closely with Caring Canines, a service dog organization where he visits old age homes and VA hospitals. And he's a chairperson for Make-A-Wish Vermont. Jonathan Goldsmith may be the man behind the most interesting man in the world moniker, but he isn't too far off from that title in real life. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. And like I said before, I didn't even scratch the surface on Jonathan Goldsmith's life. So if you want to hear more like his late night dalliances with Ginger from Gilligan's Island, or how he escaped boarding school in the back of a fruit truck, be sure to check out his book Stay Interesting. This isn't sponsored, I mean look at my subscriber count. Just a recommendation. Thanks everyone.
Stay thirsty, my friends.